So hello, Helen Snape. How are you?
I am very well. How are you, Gary?
Yeah, good. So we're in similar groups, and I come across your work, and I reached out to you, and I said I really want to have a chat. What triggered me to speak to you was like the subject we're going to talk about today. So that's like boundaries and people pleasing, and being self-employed, being a painter and decorator. I believe a lot of us are guilty of people pleasing, doing stuff we don't necessarily want to do, but do it to please people. And yeah, I just thought it'd be great to get you on, and I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. So, do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'm a boundary coach. I used to work in human resources, did that for almost 20 years. And
Hmm.
so because I've always been fascinated by people and what makes them tick and about how relationships work. And that's why I also studied psychology at university. Like I've always just been fascinated by people.
Yeah, same.
Um, yeah. And working in human resources kind of got to see like the lovely side, when you recruit people, but also the more difficult side, when there are disputes or when there are problems or people are sick. And yeah, and it was really fascinating. But people started to suggest to me, oh, have you thought about becoming a coach? And I ignored them for a while, but then I realized actually, that is the side of the job that I was enjoying more, like seeing people grow
Yeah.
and seeing them learn things. And then so I went off and I trained as a coach, and I thought about like what is it that I would really like to help people with. And I realized it's about helping people that kind of have got stuck in the same way that I was stuck probably about 7 years ago, when I discovered this thing called people pleasing and realized that I was like the worst people pleaser ever.
Yeah.
And just thought, oh my God, like this is the problem that I've been having my whole life. Like how do I stop being a people pleaser and having to figure it out? And it was like it's probably been like one of the hardest journeys that I've been
Yeah.
on, but also really, really worth it, really rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my group know I studied as a cognitive hypnotherapist, but beforehand I got help with different stuff, like anxiety and stuff like that. And yeah, that's one of my traits I discovered. I was a major people pleaser, and in my personal life, but also that could overlap into my work life as well. And it was kind of I'm still a people pleaser to a degree. Like I like to help people, I really do.
Mm.
That's just in my nature, and I'm an empath. But when it gets to the stage where it's almost overwhelming, and you kind of, even in jobs in work, you can be like people pleasing, and you don't get much sort of thanks for it, and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that bit of extra work for that customer, and um, but it's probably originates, like all our stuff from probably old programs in our head, childhood type stuff. Would you agree, or is it,
Yeah.
it's different to every individual, but it's all a behavioural pattern, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for those, I suppose, just for those that aren't really familiar with, people pleasing, it is, what it looks like is that it's that inability to say no to things. It's the saying that everything's fine when actually it isn't. It's kind of it's bending ourselves to be who we think other people want us to be, and
Mm,
it's shoving down our feelings and just ignoring them. So that's what it looks like, and it also looks like avoiding conflict, that just like
yeah,
I'm not going there, I'm not going there. And you're right to say, that there's kind of like the light side of it, so people that are people pleasers, we not normally like really caring people,
mm,
we're good team players, like we people gravitate towards us because because we tend to be like kind and loving, but
Mm,
like as you said, it's when it goes to that kind of extreme, and then the kind of the darker side of it comes out,
yeah.
and you begin to like really overextend yourself, and you're
Mm,
doing too much for other people, and so you start to feel resentful,
mm,
and also you start to just wear yourself out because you're giving too much. You're giving too much. And you're right, I believe it stems from childhood.
yeah.
I think that everybody that I've ever spoken to that has identified as a people pleaser, they've said this goes way back to childhood.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything sinister, does it?
Mm,
Because, the work I've done and the people I've spoken to, your brain works in nominal terms up until the age of 6 or whatever it is. So it's, everything's black and white, right or wrong. And,
mm,
it might just be the case you got the wrong message from a parent or peer to say, I don't know what the situation could be, but you felt you weren't doing enough or weren't good enough. So you took it wrong. And that's the point, isn't it? With all of this kind of our behaviors, we don't really know where it stems from because it just might be a misinterpretation of when we were younger and
mm.
something that was said to us on a repeated basis. But the person saying it may not have meant it in the way we took it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because I would people please, and then I would almost people please too much and then explode at one point and say, "Oh, I'm fed
Mm.
up doing it."
Uh-huh.
And you're like, it's crazy, isn't it? But it's like, oh, if I stop doing it, will the other person love me or still
Mm,
like me and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And yeah, go on.
you're right. It can be like, it can be from like obvious things in childhood, if you had a particularly dysfunctional family, but it doesn't have to be, because as you say, like when you're a child, you make everything about you. So,
Mm,
an example that from like my own childhood, like I remember, I was a real tomboy because I had two older brothers, and
mm,
I would want to wear, jeans and a t-shirt, and I'd want to go climb trees. But like my mum, she bought all these like really pretty dresses, and she'd bought them because like they weren't available when she was growing up, and
mm.
and I looked so cute in them. But I did not want to wear them. But
Yeah,
she kind of made me look a little bit kind of disappointed, like I didn't want to wear this lovely dress that she bought. And so I would interpret that with my child's mind, to
yeah,
think, oh, she's disappointed in me, like I've made her unhappy, like,
yeah.
oh, it's my responsibility to make my mum happy. And that's just the child's mind. But of course, we carry on that sort of thinking as adults, and we don't
Mm.
realize that we're doing it, and it's like it's no longer helpful.
No, and it's like other guest speakers as well. It's kind of like whatever the problem is, if you ever ask in that moment how old you feel, more
Mm,
often than not, say they're 45-year-old man, they feel like they're a child again, so
mm.
that just shows you it's an
Mm.
old program running in your subconscious, which is not true now.
Yeah, yeah, and it does, it like it shows up in all these different ways, like at work, because
Mm,
you were saying, it can be that yeah, that you just keep saying that everything's fine until
mm.
you get to that point where you're not taking it anymore and you just explode, and then everyone's around you is like, what's happened to Gary? Like,
Gary's freaking out. So I'll run through a scenario which many of us face. So you got a client where they call them just jobs. My dad used to say, "Oh, just jobs." So you'd be painting in a bedroom, and they're like, "Oh, whilst you got the brush out, can you just do X, Y, Z?" And my dad working with me, yeah, yeah, fine. And I'd always be like, "Oh, Dad, come on, we're not giving away labour for nothing." But we helped people out, and as I've got older and in my business, if it's a small favour, fine, but what we find is, and a lot of decorators say it, so you go the extra mile, you do extra bits and bobs for them, and they will turn out to be the fussiest customers ever and pick faults in your work. Why? What's that all about, Helen?
It is because if you don't if you're valuing your business, like if you're coming at it from a kind of a less than position to where your customer is at,
Mm,
then they're going to feel like entitled to your time and your
mm,
services. And so you've kind of established this, like, well, I'm here and they're kind of there.
yeah,
And so it then leads to this kind of this dynamic where it almost is like kind of becomes a bit like kind of parent child, doesn't it? And
yeah,
and they may be either consciously or maybe unconsciously know that they can take advantage of your good nature.
yeah. It's kind of like my dad works for me now and again, and he's 75, and he's still, fitter than most guys in their 30s. He still does a great job. But he would work with me over the last few years, and just part time. And then a customer would say to me, "Oh, Gary, can you do blah blah blah?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, but it's going to cost X amount." And my dad would like, "What are you doing, Gary?" And I'm like, "It's just the way it should be, because
Mm,
you need to be seen as a person in authority."
yeah.
So even when we had an incident in the group the other day where someone's trying to barter a price, and again, that would be the same. They'd end up being, we call them Karen clients, problem clients. And it's just the same, where if you're seen as the person in authority, they will have far more respect for you, and you would probably be more likely to get a job. And even another situation recently, a guy was quoting quite a big job. There's quite a number of thousands of pounds worth of job. And customer come back and said, "Look, I've had a couple other quotes, a little bit cheaper, any movement?" So we discussed in our group, and we said, "No, don't move your price at all,
Mm.
because don't start it." And he held his nerve, and he got the job. So that
Mm.
just shows you, doesn't it? Like, you wouldn't go to a dentist and he said, "Oh, 80 quid a filling. Oh, any chance you can, 60
Mm.
quid?" And if he was to say yeah, you'd be like, "I don't know about you, but alarm bells would start to ring."
Yeah, they would, wouldn't they?
Like,
Yeah, you're
not
right.
putting quite a good amount of formula in your filler or something.
Yeah, yeah, and so it is, isn't it? It comes back to, how much do I recognize actually, what I'm offering, and the value of it. So
Hmm,
I'm not going to discount it because I know it's worth this amount. You take
yeah,
it or you leave it.
yeah. And I think that's where a lot of us painters need to work on our mindset as well. And and I've been guilty of it as well, where plumbers would come in and charge a ridiculous amount to move a radiator, and yet we do full, 7 8 hour days or whatever for a flat sort of price.
Mm,
But it needs to change our mindsets in terms of what our value is, because if
mm,
we do, we all say it, and it's true, we put all the other trades, we put their work right. When they mess up, we make it look good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so people pleasing in terms of for customers, then it's a no, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because it backfires, because what happens is that it's like mission creep, isn't it? You agree to do something and then they maybe ask you to do a bit more, and then maybe you do it for that one person. Maybe that's all right. But then, maybe word gets round and then other people expect you to do the same.
Yeah,
And just gradually you're going to start to feel resentful towards those people, towards your customers, and you'll also probably start to beat yourself up about it
yeah.
because you've let it happen. And and suddenly your time is being eaten up and you're not enjoying the job so much.
Yeah, because imagine that customer going back to their friends, "Oh, Gary, and he's brilliant. He done XYZ extra." And then they
Mm.
were like, "Oh, I'm going to get Gary in, get all
Uh-huh.
these extras out of him."
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
what about when I've been guilty, all of this I've been guilty of, so I'm not saying I'm brilliant. There'd be so many jobs where I look at it, I really don't want it. I really don't want it. I'm going to put it in, not double, but I'm going to put it in
Mm.
at a high price, and I get it. Why can't, and I don't do it now, but why in years gone by, why can't I just say, no, I don't want to do it?
Mm. Mm. Well, it's all those other considerations, isn't it? If you're thinking about, well, this is going to help me pay off the mortgage or help pay off
Mm,
that bill, or it's going to put towards that holiday. Like there's all these you know, well, very practical reasons that can come in and start to, oh, you know, well, you know, perhaps you could just do this one job.
Mm.
Um, and you know, as you say, like, you know, one way of going about it is to say, well, I'll double my price, and maybe then I'll feel like it is worth doing that job.
Mm.
But it is like, no, it is knowing yourself, isn't it? Because you know, then there will be some jobs where it's just not worth any amount of money.
No, and I've done them where I've done a job, and even it didn't matter how much I was earning on it.
Mm.
You know, it just didn't feel right me doing it. I didn't want to do it. They were like really awful jobs, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, you know, I spoke to a coach years ago, and he was like, "Well, if you were earning £500 a day, you'd do any job." And I disagreed with him. I said, "No, I wouldn't,
Mm,
because that can only last so long. Yes, you could, of course, you know, 500 and put up with it, but it wouldn't. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's,
mm.
as we know, really miserable millionaires. You know,
Yeah.
it's more about doing the work you enjoy, as much as possible,
Mm.
to be able to
Yeah.
do it over a long time, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for it to be sustainable. Yeah.
Mm.
And I suppose, you know, some of that comes to being able to really listen to your own intuition, which
Yeah,
when you're a people pleaser is not something that you're used to doing, and that ability is maybe very underdeveloped because you're so used to tuning into everyone else and how they're what they're thinking and how they're feeling. So
yeah,
you're not really used to tuning into yourself and that little voice that's saying, oh, this sounds terrible.
yeah,
Or like, or just like, oh, the energy between us is so bad, like this is going to be a terrible client, like
yeah,
they're just going to moan all the time, because you're just busy ignoring that.
yeah,
So that, you know, that is why, you know, learning to undo those people pleasing patterns is so important.
yeah. And it's also like in the early days, I'd get a call and I'd be like, oh, great, someone's calling for a quote. I'll see you tonight. You know, I'd be running around like a headless chicken. But again, over as the years have gone by, I've sort of structured it a bit more. Where I say, right, I look at jobs on a Friday or a Thursday evening, and
Mhm,
you know, if someone calls on a Monday, I'll say, yeah, I'll do my quotes on a Thursday.
mhm.
You know, before I'd be running around and straight up to their house. But again, it's like before I'd have a fear of missing out in case someone looked at a job quicker. But you know, people are prepared to wait. Again, if you're seen as that person in authority.
Mm, mm,
Um, so it's just really, it's interesting, isn't it? It's all aspects of your life. So
mm,
it's obviously work, which we've discussed. It's even at home, isn't it? Just in general, you need to what's the best way to sort of analyze your life and know if you are a people pleaser,
mm.
and how the practical steps to sort of change it.
Oh, those
Or
are
we could
big
go on
questions.
forever.
Those are big questions, Gary.
Sorry, I'll put you on the
I think
spot. We've only
I
got
think
half hour.
yeah, most people recognize themselves from, you know, descriptions of typical kind of people pleasing behaviors. You know, if you're that person
Yeah, yeah,
whose automatic reaction to being asked to do something is yes. Like,
yeah,
without even thinking about it, like you
yeah.
say yes, and then afterwards you think, oh, did I really want to say yes? Or like, oh no, how do I get out of what I've just agreed to do?
Yeah, and then
um
you rack your brain for excuses how you can get out of it.
yeah,
Then that
yeah,
makes you feel
like,
bad when you
yeah,
when you say no.
yeah. And like, you know, like if you're someone that, you know, you feel like you have to be a different person depending on who you're with, you know, whether you're like doing that thing of saying to everyone, oh yeah, everything's fine, and actually it's not. That you maybe you complain about things but you put up with it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a good one. And these are all actually also signs of weak boundaries, which is probably one of the key things that I would mention in terms of, you know, what do you do about it. So that's a huge one. Like, go and learn about boundaries
yeah,
because they are how you protect yourself, how you take care of yourself, both at work but also outside of work. You know, it's things like, you know, the time boundaries, like you were saying, you know, structuring your time, saying, well, this is when I do quotes, this is when I do work, this is when I respond to calls, you know,
Yeah.
this is when I stop work, you know, this
Yeah.
is when I don't take any calls, this is when I have a holiday.
Yeah.
Like simple things like that. But you know, when we have weak boundaries, we don't necessarily know, you know, where what is okay for us and what isn't okay for us. So we need to do that work to learn about what our boundaries are, so we can then communicate them to other people,
Yeah.
and then we can stick to them ourselves and make our lives so much easier.
Yeah. It's probably, for me, it was like, I would just have this gut feeling that, you know, stuff I was doing wasn't sitting well with me. So I
Mm,
was, I guess, predominantly I wasn't looking after myself
mm,
first and foremost, which everybody should do.
mm.
Do you know what I mean? Because then, if you're giving from an empty cup, it's like that's when you lack energy and resources, because you've got nothing left to give, but you're still people pleasing. Whereas if you look after yourself first
Mm.
and you fill your cup up, and then you've got more to give, haven't you? More energy and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, you know, you're doing stuff for yourself, even if it's around a golf or gym or whatever you enjoy doing.
Mm,
There's no reason why you can't do it, because if you look at your life, you're already doing, you know, you're doing your work, you're looking after the kids, partner, whatever it may be. You
mm.
know, as long as you're not being selfish, you know, you got to look after yourself, haven't you?
You do, you know, and yeah, and people often ask me, oh, you know, well, if I do those things, aren't I being selfish? It's like, well, if you're coming from a place of being a people pleaser, you're not going to end up like a selfish person. You
No.
really not. It is just a case of you do actually need to put yourself first, as you say, in order to give yourself what you need, so that you're then able to give that to other people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say definitely, you know, number one, learn about boundaries so that you
Hmm.
can implement them. uh Secondly, like if you're fairly kind of new to this, then I would say master the pause, like just a really simple practical thing.
Yeah.
But instead of that yes coming out of your mouth, you know, when somebody says, oh, can you just add this onto the job,
Yeah.
practice just breathing, saying nothing, and checking in with yourself before you respond. Or
Yeah.
maybe building in a delay, you know, to say, oh, I need to check my calendar, and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Just a simple way for you to stop yourself from automatically saying yes to things. Really
Mm.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good advice. Yeah, and it will help people for sure. You know,
Yeah.
these type of conversations, and you know, the conversations I have with other people, it's like, you know, in my group, I look at it. Yes, we talk about paint and products, but
Mm.
just life in general, and how to help each other, really, to navigate life. Because if you're happy in your life, you're going to be much happier at work as well. You know, so
Yeah.
it works all round, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And then people pleasing, as you say, like it does tend to appear in different parts of your life, you
Mm.
know. So, you know, for me, you know, it in work terms, I I overworked, and you know,
Mm.
I didn't take the breaks, and I did end up burning out at work.
Yeah.
But it was also affecting me in my personal life. So, you know, I ended up in a very unhealthy relationship, and I stayed there even
Yeah.
though I wasn't happy, because you know I was a real giver, and I met a, you know, somebody that was a real taker. So
Yeah.
we kind of
And
gelled in a horrible way.
that's a good point as well. It's like, you know, with tradesmen, like it's quite high stats, I believe, in relationship breakdowns, because
Mhm.
you people please, so you provide for your family. You know, you work 5 days, you often work weekends. You know, I know guys work all day and doing night shifts, working all night to bring in extra money. You know, they're literally working hard to
Mm.
provide. So you think you're doing good for your family or whatever else, but you know, your partner's at home, they don't see you, they might
Mm.
get resentful. You know, there's a lack of communication. and then suddenly, you know, relationships break down because the whole dynamic is not working correctly. So then that's another reason to really you look at how your work scheduling. I know we all need money, you know, I'm not saying we do it for money to survive, and especially now, you know, the cost of stuff. But if you really analyze it all, and even for me as well, I'd get busy, have subcontractors, and then take my eye off the ball a little bit. So it looked like I was busy and loads of work coming in, but I wasn't being very efficient in managing my workers and my finances and stuff like that. And I guess the point I'm making is it's just to really step back and analyze your whole work-life balance. And yes, you might have more money, but you've got less time, and it's such a fine balance, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And as you said, like if your, you know, if your marriage is breaking down in the meantime, it's like, well, you know, what it's like, what are you doing all of this for in the first place? You know, like
Yeah,
if you're working for yourself, like as you say, yeah, you need to bring in the money, but you know, presumably it's also that, you know, that you want to be able to have some time with your family and do things that you enjoy.
yeah,
So, you know, let's make sure that there's some of that there as well, and that you're not just like saving up for some indeterminate date in the future when you can start your life.
yeah, yeah. Or
Like,
do all those hours for a 2 week luxury holiday, you know, out of the 52 weeks of the year. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
We could talk for hours and hours on this, couldn't we, Helen? It's such a
we
big
could,
subject.
we
But
could, yeah. So yeah, the three things, yeah. So set boundaries,
yeah,
master the pause, and thirdly, I'd say like start making your own rules for your life
yeah. Actually,
because yeah,
write down what you want from your life.
yeah, because I think we're often driven by things that we think we should do
Yeah.
that other people have maybe told us in the past. And it's like it's okay for you to write the own rules for your own life.
Yeah. And even, I guess, sort of at the end of each day, if you feel you are this sort of person, just analyze your day and write down in a diary or something, you know, situations where you felt you people pleased, and just sort of analyze it a little bit, perhaps, you know, and then you can make changes.
Yes.
Yeah, Helen, I'm going to pause our recording in a minute. I'll have a quick chat with you after, but I really, really appreciate you coming on. It's been
Oh,
a very, very interesting topic, and I'm sure one a lot of people can relate to.
yeah. I think we probably could talk for many hours about it. But yeah, I hope, yeah, I hope people find it helpful.
Yeah, 100%. And I really appreciate your time, Helen.
Oh, my pleasure. My
All right.
pleasure.
Have a good
Yeah.
day.
All right. You too, Gary. All
Take
right.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.